Maya Khan cared for Arman Rizvi for 3 years. When he left her $2.5 million, his family made sure she never got a cent. Maya Khan had never imagined that her life would revolve around someone else so completely. For 3 years, she had dedicated herself to Arman Rizvi, a wealthy businessman whose presence dominated every room he entered. People outside only saw him as a stern, sometimes unapproachable tycoon, a man who made deals worth millions and carried himself with quiet authority. But behind the closed doors of his mansion, Arman was fragile, vulnerable, and entirely dependent on someone he could trust. Maya became that person. She managed his medications, ensured he attended every doctor's appointment on time, and monitored every aspect of his declining health. She cooked his meals to perfection, cleaned his home meticulously, and provided companionship that no nurse or staff member could replicate. Her days and nights blurred together, measured only by his needs and moods. Slowly, she learned to read the subtle signs of his condition: a slight tremor in his hand, a hesitation before taking a step, the quiet sigh that told her he was in pain. In these moments, Maya realized that her role had become far more than just a caregiver. She had become the anchor that kept him grounded. Outside the mansion, the world moved on as usual, but inside, a delicate balance persisted. Every action she took seemed small, yet it carried enormous weight in his life. She never sought recognition or reward, driven only by a quiet sense of duty and compassion. But little did she know that those years of care, those countless sacrifices, were being watched by more than just Arman. Shadows lingered around her, calculating, waiting, and ready to challenge everything she thought she had earned. Arman Rizvi's wealth was immense, the kind of fortune that could change lives with a single decision. His properties spanned cities, his investments stretched across countries, and his bank accounts contained sums that most people could only imagine. Yet Maya had never paid much attention to the numbers. Her focus was on his well-being, not the money that seemed to flow effortlessly around him. Still, even she could not ignore the subtle signs that Arman had been thinking about his legacy. Papers were shuffled more carefully, doors locked more securely, and sometimes she caught him staring at a pile of documents as if deciding which pieces of his life would survive him. Months before his health took a sharp decline, he had begun writing a will. Maya had no idea what it contained, and Arman never spoke of it. She assumed that, like everything else in his life, it was private and would remain so. But the Rizvi family had long been aware of his plans, watching from a distance, their interest in his wealth sharp and calculating. While Maya devoted herself entirely to his care, they moved quietly behind the scenes, strategizing, scheming, and positioning themselves for a future that would favor them. The tension between loyalty and inheritance hung in the air like a storm waiting to break. Maya believed her years of service, her sleepless nights, and her unwavering support would naturally be recognized. She never considered that a single line on a piece of paper could outweigh everything she had given. The thought that Arman's family might challenge his final wishes was distant and unreal, yet the seeds of conflict were already planted, hidden in the quiet corners of the mansion where shadows grew longer with every passing day. Arman's health had always been fragile, but one evening it took a sudden, terrifying turn. A sharp pain in his chest left him pale and gasping, and Maya immediately recognized the seriousness of the situation. She called for an ambulance, her hands steady despite the fear twisting inside her. As the sirens wailed through the quiet streets, she stayed at his side, monitoring every shallow breath, every faltering heartbeat. The paramedics arrived, but even with their presence, it was clear that Arman needed more than medical skill. He needed someone who knew him completely, someone who could anticipate his needs before he even spoke. Maya moved calmly around him, adjusting pillows, giving him water, holding his hand, whispering words of reassurance that only she could offer. Hours passed in this tense limbo, time stretching and folding in on itself, each moment a reminder of how precarious life could be. The hospital was a blur of machines, nurses, and monitors, but Maya remained focused, refusing to leave his side. She remembered the quiet moments before his collapse, the nights she had stayed awake tracking his medications, the small adjustments she had made to keep him comfortable. Those years of vigilance now felt heavier, charged with a desperate urgency. Outside the hospital walls, the world went on, oblivious to the life-or-death struggle unfolding within. Yet even as she cared for him, Maya could sense the presence of other eyes, observers whose intentions were not entirely innocent. Shadows moved in the periphery, family members watching, waiting, and calculating, unaware that every detail of that night, every movement and decision, was being recorded by the surveillance cameras that quietly captured the reality of what was happening, preserving evidence that would later become crucial. Arman passed away quietly in the early hours, leaving the mansion and its inhabitants in stunned silence. The life that had once filled the rooms with quiet authority was suddenly gone, replaced by an emptiness that felt heavy and suffocating. Maya sat beside him for a long time, her hands resting on the sheets, still refusing to leave, unwilling to let the final moments slip away without her presence. She felt a deep sense of loss, not just for the man she had cared for, but for the life she had poured into him over the past 3 years. Outside, the world remained unaware, but inside the mansion, tensions shifted instantly. The Rizvi family gathered, not in mourning, but in quiet strategy. Their conversations were hushed, their faces set with the kind of resolve that comes from those who expect control and entitlement. They were already calculating the steps they would take to influence the inheritance, to ensure that the wealth stayed within their circle. Maya, absorbed in grief and memories of long nights spent tending to Arman, barely noticed their subtle movements. She believed that loyalty and care had a weight of their own, that the love and dedication she had given would be enough to secure some recognition, perhaps even a modest reward. But the family's focus was entirely different. Every gesture, every glance exchanged among them spoke of ambition, of plans to redirect Arman's final wishes. Shadows lingered in the corners of the mansion, quiet and watchful. Maya did not yet realize that the very people who should have respected her devotion were already plotting to erase her presence from the life and legacy of the man she had cared for so completely. The day the will was read felt surreal to Maya. She had expected grief, sadness, perhaps a quiet acknowledgement of her years of care, but nothing prepared her for the words that would unfold in the room. The lawyer, a formal figure with a careful tone, began outlining Arman's final wishes. As each portion of the estate was assigned, Maya's heart pounded with a mixture of hope and apprehension. Then came her name. Arman had left her $2.5 million, a substantial sum that reflected not only his gratitude, but also the depth of his trust and appreciation. For a brief moment, Maya felt relief and validation. Every sleepless night, every careful adjustment of his medications, every meal prepared with precision, seemed to culminate in this single acknowledgement. Yet the moment of triumph was fleeting. The Rizvi family's reaction was immediate and unmistakable. Their faces hardened, their eyes cold and calculating, as if the words themselves were a personal affront. Whispers circulated around her, accusations that she had somehow manipulated him, that her presence had been motivated by greed. The room, filled with wealth and power, suddenly felt suffocating. Maya realized that the simple act of being named in the will had ignited a silent war she had never anticipated. Her reward, intended as a recognition of loyalty, had become a flashpoint for envy, suspicion, and outright hostility. The balance of care and inheritance, once invisible, now stood exposed, fragile, and contested. Even as she tried to process the shock, Maya could sense that the family would stop at nothing to undermine her, to ensure that what was rightfully hers might never reach her hands. The $2.5 million, a symbol of gratitude, had become a battlefield. Almost immediately after the will was read, Maya began to notice subtle but disturbing changes. Bank accounts were suddenly frozen, and documents she had been told were ready for signing seemed to vanish without explanation. Letters and notices arrived, each more confusing than the last, instructing her to delay any action until further review. Friends tried to help, but even they seemed hesitant, unsure of how to navigate the influence and reach of the Rizvi family. Behind the scenes, the family moved like shadows, quietly coordinating their next steps. Their lawyers were swift and thorough, sending formal letters, challenging forms, and filing requests that made even the simplest transaction a maze of bureaucracy. Every attempt Maya made to claim what was rightfully hers met resistance. The mansion, once a place of care and routine, now felt like a fortress, with eyes tracking her every move. Security personnel, previously neutral, began acting differently, offering excuses, subtly redirecting her path, delaying access. Maya sensed an unspoken warning in every gesture, every glance, every door closed in her face. She understood that the family was using every tool at their disposal: wealth, influence, and connections, all aimed at undermining her claim. But Maya was determined. Each obstacle strengthened her resolve rather than weakening it. She meticulously documented every notice, every delayed form, every strange encounter. Though the effort was exhausting and the frustration mounting, she knew that giving up would mean surrendering not just her inheritance, but the recognition of all she had sacrificed for Arman. With every calculated move by the Rizvi family, Maya realized the fight ahead would demand not only patience but cunning, and that justice would not be given freely. It would have to be earned. Determined not to be intimidated, Maya began taking active steps to claim the inheritance that Arman had promised her. She visited banks, signed forms, and met with lawyers, carefully following every procedure to ensure nothing could be challenged. Yet each step was met with resistance that seemed designed to exhaust her. Bank officers claimed missing signatures or incomplete paperwork. Legal teams cited procedural errors or requested documents she had already submitted. Every interaction became a test of patience and persistence. Meanwhile, the Rizvi family's influence was felt everywhere. Emails went unanswered, appointments were suddenly canceled, and her calls were often ignored or redirected. Friends who had tried to support her began stepping back, too wary of the subtle pressures surrounding the family's network. Despite the obstacles, Maya pressed on. She meticulously recorded each denial, every delay, and every suspicious interaction. Her determination was fueled not only by the money but by the principle that loyalty and dedication should not be dismissed or erased. Even when small victories were snatched away by unexpected setbacks, she refused to yield. The mansion, once a place of care and refuge, now symbolized control and power wielded against her. Family members seemed to anticipate her every move, intercepting documents, questioning her motives, and subtly undermining her credibility. Yet, behind the frustration, Maya began to notice patterns, repeated behaviors, hidden connections, and moments where the family's confidence faltered. Each obstacle revealed not just their determination to block her, but also a vulnerability that could be exploited. It became clear that this was no longer a passive fight. It was a battle that required strategy, observation, and unyielding resolve to ensure that Arman's final wishes would not be stolen from her. Weeks into her struggle, Maya discovered that the mansion's CCTV cameras might hold answers. Initially installed for security, the cameras had silently recorded every corner of the property for years, capturing everything that happened within Arman's domain. With the help of a technician, she obtained access to the footage from the nights following Arman's passing. What she saw made her heart pound. Family members, previously polite and measured in her presence, moved through the mansion with a different purpose. They entered Arman's private study late at night, often carrying briefcases or folders. Their movements were hurried and secretive, their faces tense, aware that even the cameras might expose them. In some clips, they rifled through drawers, shifting papers and documents as if searching for something critical. Every time she watched, a new detail emerged: a document being slipped into a bag, a file being replaced with another. The footage showed a side of the family she had not imagined: precise, calculating, and willing to bend rules to ensure their control over Arman's estate. Maya felt a mix of fear and determination. The recordings revealed not just their intent, but a pattern, a methodical attempt to manipulate or even erase evidence of Arman's true wishes. Watching the images, she realized that the $2.5 million he had left for her was at real risk. The family's plan was not subtle. It was deliberate and persistent. For the first time, Maya understood that the struggle was not only legal but tangible, captured in pixels and angles, frozen in time, waiting to be used as proof that would become the key to fighting back against those who sought to take from her what Arman had intended to give. One of the most shocking moments captured on CCTV occurred when Maya attempted to enter Arman's private study, the room where all his most important documents were kept. She approached the door with the legal papers she had brought, hoping to finally review what was rightfully hers. As she reached for the handle, the footage showed a family member suddenly appear, key in hand, and lock the door behind them with deliberate precision. Maya's confusion was visible even in the grainy footage. She tugged at the handle, rattled the lock, and glanced around in disbelief. Every attempt to enter was intercepted. On other nights, the cameras captured her repeatedly being redirected, stopped by family members who offered polite excuses or feigned concern for her well-being. Yet there was an unmistakable coldness in their movements, a calculated effort to assert control over the space she had every right to access. The CCTV revealed more than just doors being locked. It showed patterns of obstruction, subtle manipulations of schedules, and orchestrated meetings where documents were moved or hidden. Maya watched herself appear powerless, but the footage also highlighted the family's overconfidence, their belief that no one was truly observing. Each time she tried to approach the study, another relative would intervene, seemingly aware of her every step. What struck her most was the audacity of their actions. They assumed that by controlling physical access, they could control her claim entirely. Yet the cameras had frozen every interaction, every tactic, preserving evidence that could expose their intentions. For Maya, the realization was chilling but empowering. Even if they tried to keep her out, every move they made was documented, and the key to proving their schemes lay hidden in the silent, unblinking eyes of the CCTV. As Maya dug deeper into the legal process, she began noticing troubling inconsistencies in the paperwork related to Arman's estate. At first, they seemed minor: dates that didn't match, signatures that looked slightly off, and references to documents she had never seen before. But the more she examined, the more it became clear that something was wrong. Whispers from former staff hinted that the original will, the one Arman had carefully drafted, might have been swapped after his death. The thought sent a chill through her. If true, it meant that the $2.5 million he had left for her could be erased entirely. She began comparing copies of the will with bank statements and letters Arman had written over the past months. Patterns emerged: changes in amounts, missing pages, and signatures that seemed forced or traced. The realization was horrifying. The family she had seen every day, the ones who had smiled politely while plotting in silence, might have altered the most personal document in Arman's life to suit their own desires. Maya's resolve hardened. She knew that proving the swap would not be easy. Lawyers cited delays, procedural loopholes, and technicalities, while the Rizvi family's influence seemed to grow with each passing day. Yet Maya refused to be intimidated. She meticulously collected every piece of evidence she could find, from emails to security logs to witness statements. Every clue, no matter how small, became a thread she could follow. What had once seemed like a straightforward inheritance battle had transformed into a web of deceit, forgery, and calculated manipulation. Maya understood now that the fight for what Arman had intended for her would demand not only courage but careful strategy, patience, and unwavering determination to confront the family's shadowy maneuvers. Realizing the scale of the challenge she faced, Maya decided to hire a private investigator. She needed someone who could move discreetly, who understood the tactics of wealthy families and the quiet ways they manipulated the law. The investigator, a former police officer familiar with high-profile cases, began surveillance on the mansion and its surroundings. Almost immediately, patterns emerged. Family members met frequently with unidentified visitors in the dead of night, often entering through side doors or secluded gates. They carried folders, briefcases, and sometimes large envelopes, disappearing into parked cars before leaving the property. Each meeting was carefully timed, suggesting a coordinated effort rather than random interactions. The investigator documented every movement, capturing faces, license plates, and entry times. One of the most unsettling discoveries was the way the family treated the study and office spaces. Documents were moved, shuffled, and occasionally removed entirely. Files that had been there one day were gone the next, replaced with different papers or nothing at all. Maya watched the footage in disbelief. The people she had once trusted to respect Arman's legacy were actively working to erase her from it. Every observation revealed both their determination and their vulnerability, their overconfidence in thinking no one could catch them. For Maya, the investigation became a lifeline. Each piece of evidence, every captured detail, was proof that she was not imagining the obstacles in her path. She began to see a way forward. By gathering undeniable evidence of their secret meetings and document manipulation, she could finally challenge the family's attempts to block her inheritance and reclaim what Arman had intended for her. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. Among the stacks of papers the investigator had secured from hidden corners of the mansion, one document stood out. A letter Arman had signed weeks before his death, clearly and unambiguously naming Maya as a beneficiary of his estate. The paper was neat, official-looking, and included instructions for the distribution of his wealth, leaving no room for doubt about his intentions. When Maya saw it for the first time, a wave of relief washed over her, followed immediately by anxiety. She knew that the Rizvi family would attempt to discredit it or claim it was irrelevant. True to form, the family did not waste time. They insisted the document was lost, misplaced, or damaged beyond recognition, casting doubt on its authenticity and refusing to acknowledge its existence in any legal capacity. Maya refused to be intimidated. She made multiple copies, secured the original with trusted legal counsel, and began building a timeline that proved Arman had signed it while fully aware of its contents. Every detail mattered. Dates, handwriting, and witnesses were carefully documented. The family's attempts to minimize its significance only strengthened Maya's resolve. She realized that this piece of paper was more than just legal proof. It was a testament to Arman's trust and her years of devotion. It represented the tangible acknowledgement of sacrifices she had made quietly and without complaint. The battle ahead was still dangerous, filled with delays, challenges, and attempts to undermine her credibility, but Maya now had a weapon that could not be ignored. The document was her anchor, a lifeline in a storm of manipulation, and the key to ensuring that Arman's wishes would survive the Rizvi family's relentless interference. As Maya pressed forward, a creeping sense of unease began to dominate her life. It wasn't just the legal battles or the family's relentless attempts to block her inheritance. It was the feeling of being constantly watched. Security cameras outside her home seemed to follow her every movement, capturing every visit, every phone call, every meeting with lawyers or friends. Even the small routines she once took for granted, walking to the corner shop, leaving her car in the driveway, felt like performances under invisible eyes. Anonymous calls started arriving, warnings delivered in quiet, calculated tones, urging her to let it go or think about the consequences. Friends and acquaintances began distancing themselves, subtly withdrawing from her life as though fear could be contagious. The sense of isolation was overwhelming. Yet Maya refused to be intimidated. She doubled her vigilance, documenting every strange call, every suspicious encounter, and every instance of interference from unknown observers. Each threat, each attempt to unsettle her, only strengthened her resolve. She realized that the Rizvi family's influence extended far beyond the mansion, touching people, institutions, and systems she had once trusted to remain neutral. Every action she took was now measured, cautious, deliberate, because one wrong step could give the family an advantage. Despite the constant tension, Maya discovered a surprising clarity in the chaos. She began noticing patterns, small cracks in the family's careful planning, moments when their overconfidence allowed evidence to surface. These cracks became clues, guiding her next moves. Though her life had become a careful dance under surveillance and threat, Maya understood that vigilance, patience, and meticulous attention to detail would be her strongest allies. The shadows surrounding her were real, but she was no longer passive. She was preparing to strike back with proof. The breakthrough came when CCTV footage from a local bank surfaced, shaking Maya to her core. The video was shaky and grainy, but the images were unmistakable. A member of the Rizvi family, moving with deliberate care, was seen attempting to forge her signature on crucial documents. The clip captured every detail: the way they paused to compare the signature to an original, the nervous glances toward the bank counter, the hurried movements to hide the papers. Watching it, Maya felt a mix of anger, fear, and vindication. For the first time, she had concrete, undeniable proof that the family was not merely obstructing her through bureaucracy. They were actively attempting to steal her inheritance. The implications were staggering. This was no longer just a battle over documents or procedures. It was a deliberate criminal act. Maya immediately shared the footage with her lawyer, who recognized its significance. The images clearly showed intent, method, and a direct threat to her rightful claim. It became clear that every delay, every missing document, and every interference had been part of a broader plan to erase her from Arman's estate. Yet the footage also revealed cracks in the family's confidence. Their careful demeanor faltered under the scrutiny of the cameras. They were skilled at manipulating people, but they could not erase what had been recorded. For Maya, this evidence was empowering. It transformed fear into strategy. The battle was no longer theoretical. It was tangible. Every movement captured on film could be used to challenge the Rizvi's attempts, to expose their deceit, and to secure what Arman had intended for her. The fight was far from over, but now she had a weapon they could not ignore. Armed with the bank's CCTV footage and other evidence, Maya took the first decisive step. She brought everything to the authorities. The files, videos, and documented encounters painted a clear picture of deliberate interference and forgery. Initially, the response was slow. Bureaucracy, red tape, and the Rizvi family's deep connections made every step feel like pushing against a mountain. Lawyers requested clarifications, additional evidence, and witness statements, each delay designed to wear her down. Yet Maya refused to be intimidated. She meticulously followed every requirement, submitting multiple copies, notarized statements, and detailed timelines. Each document strengthened her case, creating a chain of proof that was difficult to dispute. Meanwhile, the family's lawyers tried every tactic to counter her claims. They filed motions to dismiss evidence, questioned her credibility, and attempted to cast doubt on the authenticity of the CCTV footage. Even with these obstacles, cracks began to appear in their strategy. The authorities, faced with clear video evidence, records of suspicious activity, and witnesses corroborating Maya's claims, could not ignore the patterns. Slowly, the wheels of justice began to turn. Court dates were scheduled, and the family's attempts to delay proceedings grew increasingly transparent. Maya realized that patience and persistence were now her greatest tools. Every piece of evidence she had collected over months became crucial, not only for proving her rightful claim, but also for exposing the lengths to which the Rizvis would go to block her. The legal battle was exhausting, tense, and fraught with uncertainty, but Maya had transformed fear and isolation into determination, understanding that only relentless effort could ensure Arman's wishes were honored and justice finally delivered. Just when the legal battle seemed endless, an unexpected ally emerged. The housemaid, who had worked in Arman's household for over a decade, came forward with critical information. She had observed Arman's daily routines, his private habits, and, most importantly, the way he spoke about Maya in private. She revealed the existence of hidden letters Arman had written, expressing his gratitude and explicitly stating that Maya was to receive $2.5 million from his estate. These letters were tucked away in a locked drawer, a place the family had overlooked, and they contained not only instructions for the inheritance, but also heartfelt words that underscored Maya's role in Arman's life. The revelation was electrifying. Each letter corroborated the timeline of the original will, proving that Arman had made a conscious, deliberate decision to reward her for her loyalty and care. Maya felt a surge of validation and relief, knowing that these documents provided undeniable proof of his intentions. The housemaid also described instances when the family had attempted to access these letters surreptitiously, confirming Maya's suspicions that they had been manipulating documents and orchestrating obstructions. The letters became the cornerstone of Maya's case, reinforcing her legal standing and giving her lawyer concrete evidence to challenge the Rizvi family's claims. For the first time, she felt that justice was within reach. These handwritten words were more than legal proof. They were a testament to the trust, gratitude, and bond she had shared with Arman. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every careful act of devotion had been recognized by him. And now, with the housemaid's testimony, that recognition could no longer be denied, ignored, or stolen. As Maya's evidence grew stronger, the case began to attract attention outside the courtroom. Journalists caught wind of the story, and media outlets began reporting on the dramatic battle between a devoted caregiver and a powerful, wealthy family. The narrative was compelling. A woman who had dedicated years of her life to caring for a dying man was now fighting to claim the fortune he had promised her. Public sympathy leaned heavily in her favor. Articles highlighted her tireless devotion, the CCTV footage, the forged documents, and the letters Arman had written expressing his trust and gratitude. Social media amplified the story, with ordinary people expressing outrage over the family's attempts to block Maya's inheritance. The Rizvi family, accustomed to operating behind closed doors and controlling narratives, found themselves on the defensive. Their carefully cultivated image of wealth and power began to crack under public scrutiny. They attempted damage control, issuing statements portraying Maya as opportunistic and casting doubt on the authenticity of the evidence she had gathered. Yet, the leaks of CCTV footage, the letters, and the detailed accounts from insiders made it impossible for the public to ignore the truth. Every new revelation strengthened Maya's position, not only legally but socially. Support poured in, from strangers offering assistance to legal experts providing guidance pro bono. The court of public opinion, often a force more powerful than formal authority, had shifted decisively. Maya realized that the Rizvi family's influence had limits, and that exposure and transparency could be as powerful as lawyers and legal filings. With each article, each post, and each public conversation, the path to justice became clearer, and the family's attempts to manipulate both wealth and perception began to unravel. The day of the final court hearing arrived, bringing with it a tension that seemed to fill every corner of the room. Maya entered quietly, her documents and evidence meticulously organized, every piece a testament to months of careful work and relentless determination. The Rizvi family sat across from her, their expressions tense, their confidence less assured than it had been in months. Lawyers for both sides presented their cases, but the focus quickly turned to the indisputable evidence Maya had collected. CCTV footage showing interference and document manipulation, bank records confirming attempts at forgery, and the letters Arman had written explicitly naming her as a beneficiary. Each piece of evidence was scrutinized, cross-examined, and validated by experts, leaving little room for doubt. Witnesses, including the housemaid and the private investigator, gave detailed accounts of the family's activities and intentions. Attempts by the Rizvi family to discredit the materials were met with firm rebuttals, as the documentation was thorough and irrefutable. The judge examined every document carefully, the weight of the evidence pressing down on the room. For Maya, the tension was almost unbearable, but beneath it, a quiet confidence grew. She realized that the truth, captured in pixels, paper, and testimony, could not be manipulated or ignored. Hours passed as arguments were made and countered, but the conclusion became inevitable. When the verdict was finally announced, it was a validation of everything she had fought for. Maya was awarded the full $2.5 million, along with additional compensation for the harassment and obstruction she had endured. The Rizvi family, despite wealth, connections, and influence, had failed to bend justice to their will. Maya had persevered, proving that dedication, patience, and evidence could triumph over greed and deception. The moment Maya finally received her inheritance was surreal, a mix of relief, triumph, and quiet reflection. After months of relentless struggle, she was handed what Arman had intended for her, $2.5 million, along with additional compensation for the legal harassment she had endured. The money itself was significant, but for Maya, it represented far more than wealth. It was acknowledgement of every sacrifice she had made, every sleepless night she had spent caring for Arman, and every moment of unwavering loyalty. The Rizvi family's reaction was immediate but restrained, a combination of anger, frustration, and disbelief. They had believed their influence and scheming could erase her claim, but the court had seen through every tactic, every attempt to manipulate documents and obstruct justice. Their smiles were tight, their gestures controlled, as if trying to maintain dignity in the face of an undeniable loss. Maya, however, felt no need for confrontation. The victory was hers without theatrics or vindictiveness. She quietly secured her legal and financial standing, ensuring that the estate documents and bank transfers were finalized without further interference. For the first time in months, she could breathe, knowing that Arman's wishes had been honored and that justice had prevailed. Friends and allies who had supported her throughout the ordeal celebrated quietly but sincerely, recognizing the courage it took to stand firm against such powerful opposition. While the Rizvi family retreated into their own world, plotting future moves that would ultimately have no effect, Maya stepped into a new chapter of her life. The battle had tested her in ways she could never have imagined, but it had also proven her resilience, patience, and unwavering commitment. In the end, she emerged not just victorious, but vindicated, carrying the quiet satisfaction of having preserved truth and justice against the odds. In the aftermath of the legal battle, Maya returned to a quieter life, one shaped by both relief and lingering memories. The $2.5 million she had fought so hard to claim allowed her to regain stability, but it was the sense of justice and recognition that mattered most. The months of fear, surveillance, and manipulation had left scars, both emotional and psychological, but they also strengthened her resolve and taught her the value of vigilance, patience, and careful planning. She avoided unnecessary confrontation with the Rizvi family, who now operated in the shadows, their influence diminished and their plans thwarted. Maya understood that her victory was not just a personal triumph, but a cautionary tale for anyone who believed that loyalty and dedication could be easily erased. She organized her affairs with meticulous care, ensuring that her future was secure and that no one could manipulate her again. Occasionally, she revisited the surveillance footage and the letters from Arman, not out of obsession, but to remind herself of the reality she had faced and the lessons she had learned. The story of her struggle spread quietly, through friends, community circles, and eventually media coverage, becoming an example of how determination and truth could overcome wealth and influence. Maya also became more observant, more cautious, and more attuned to the subtle ways people could exploit trust, but she refused to let fear define her life. She focused on building a future shaped by her own decisions, carrying forward the memory of Arman's trust and gratitude. In the end, Maya's story remained a testament to loyalty, perseverance, and courage, a reminder that even in the shadow of deception and greed, truth could prevail, and justice, though delayed, could ultimately be won.